Having delved into the darkness of the mind of Gilles de Rais, the noble knight who shocked medieval France with his unspeakable crimes, we now cross the boundaries of time and history. Almost 2 centuries later, in the frozen lands of Hungary, another noble figure would leave her trail of blood. Known as the Bloody Countess, Elizabeth Báthory took horror to a new level. And while Gilles killed in the shadows of French castles, Elizabeth transformed her palace into a veritable human hunting ground. She was noble, powerful, and feared. But behind her aristocratic facade lurked a cruel, sadistic mind, perhaps even obsessed with eternal youth. Elizabeth Báthory was not just a countess, she became the symbol of one of the most macabre stories of feudal Europe. If you enjoy delving into the minds of history's most obscure serial killers, this episode is for you. Today, we'll explore the life and crimes of a woman known as the greatest serial killer in history, the Bloody Countess of Hungary. Elizabeth Báthory was born in 1560 into one of Hungary's wealthiest and most influential families. From a young age, she demonstrated intelligence, charisma, and strangely aggressive behavior. She was raised amidst wars, torture, and political conspiracies. At 15, she married Count Ferenc Nadasdy, and together, they ruled the feared Cactus Castle. After a few years together, Ferenc Nadasdy died in 1604, at the age of 48, probably due to complications from a long illness, which left him incapacitated in the last years of his life. His natural death marked the beginning of the decline in influence of his wife, Elizabeth, who became more exposed to the investigations and accusations that would emerge a few years later. Because after her husband's death, control of the castle and the servants fell completely into her hands, and that's when the horror stories began. The castle began to welcome young peasant women with promises of work. Many never returned. Witnesses reported that Elizabeth beat, mutilated, and burned her victims with a red-hot iron. Some were sewn together alive, drowned in ice, or left to die slowly. A legend that persists to this day claims that she bathed in the blood of young women to maintain her youth. Although controversial, this image immortalized her as the vampire of Transylvania. The number of victims is estimated to be between 80 and 650. After years of silence and fear, complaints reached the King of Hungary. An official investigation was conducted, and dozens of bodies were found around the castle. Elizabeth was arrested but never tried in public, her social standing shielded her from formal conviction. However, she was sentenced to life imprisonment. She died in 1614, confined within a single bricked-up room of the castle. Alone, in the dark. Some historians question the veracity of the accusations. They say she was the victim of a political plot to steal her land. But the testimonies and remains found suggest that at least part of the story was true. Elizabeth Báthory was no ordinary murderer. She was a dark reflection of an era where power, violence, and impunity walked hand in hand. After all, how could such a powerful figure disappear without leaving any marks, or victims? While Elizabeth Báthory's name has become synonymous with horror and wickedness, few ask, what about her family? Could they have turned a blind eye, or perhaps shared the same crimes? Yes, there are historical records and speculation about the involvement of Elizabeth Báthory's family members and employees in her crimes, but it is important to separate what is documented from what is rumor and legend. Ferenc Nadasdy, her powerful husband, known as the Black Knight of Hungary, taught her brutal torture methods. But he died before the horrors of the castle came to light. Coincidence, or a timely escape from scandal? Although Ferenc was known for his cruelty on the battlefield and for teaching Elizabeth torture methods, there is no formal evidence that he participated in her crimes against peasant women. Elizabeth had several children, but none of them were formally charged or involved in the legal proceedings related to the crimes. Her heirs of the noble line were spared. After their mother's arrest, they lived protected by their noble blood, while close servants were thrown to the dogs of justice and maintained a noble life protected by their family connections. Dorothea, Ilona, Catalin, and Fixco, forgotten names, but hands that also bore the weight of death. During the 1611 trial, these four people close to Elizabeth were accused, tried, and punished for their direct involvement in the murders. These accomplices reported torture, murder, and the disappearance of young women, claiming they often acted under direct orders from the Countess. Some of them confessed under torture and were ultimately executed. Dorothea Sentis, or Dorco, was an elderly woman of peasant origin, a former wet nurse and faithful servant of Báthory. Described as cruel, she actively participated in the tortures with coldness and cruelty. She was considered one of the chief enforcers of the Countess's orders. During her trial, she was accused of killing or aiding in the murder of dozens of girls. She was sentenced to death and brutally executed. Her fingers were torn off with red-hot pincers before being burned alive. Ilona Jo, or Helena Jo, another servant who assisted in the torture sessions, participated directly in the corporal punishment sessions, using torture instruments. She was accused of committing sadistic acts against her victims and keeping the crime secret. She was also tried and executed. She suffered the same fate as Dorothea, torture followed by execution. Catalin, or Katerina Banica, younger than the others, was the widow of a soldier and was reportedly recruited later to assist in the violent acts. Some reports say she was less involved or was forced to participate. Despite her milder involvement than the others, she was also sentenced to life imprisonment. She died after years of incarceration. János Fixco Ugeri, the only male among the close accomplices, was short and considered a servant or personal assistant. Although he did not personally torture, he assisted by restraining the victims and cleaning up their tracks. He participated in the capture, punishment, and restraint of the victims. He was identified as a passive, but nonetheless important, accomplice. He was sentenced to death and executed along with Dorothea and Ilona. These four names have gone down in history as the direct hands of the Countess of the Blood, and their trials were fundamental to what is known today about the crimes in the castle. Blood flowed at Cactus Castle, but the nobility's silence was even thicker. The truth may have been buried, along with the victims. And you, could you see behind her mask? If you want to continue exploring history's most twisted minds, subscribe to the Behind the Mask, True Crime channel and turn on notifications. New episodes every week.